Okay, picture this. It is January 20th, 1943. A heavily armed Hawker Typhoon fighter plane is screaming out of the sky, diving straight down the middle of a Brussels city street. Now, the pilot isn't aiming at a military base or an airfield. He's actually flying so low to evade German anti-aircraft radar that he's practically weaving between the rooftops, accelerating directly toward a prominent 12-story building right in the heart of the Belgian capital.
But this isn't just any building. The target is 453 Avenue Louise. Since 1940, this luxury high-rise had been commandeered as the feared Gestapo headquarters in occupied Belgium. And the pilot gripping the flight stick? Well, he's about to do something completely unauthorized, absolutely terrifying, and honestly, historically brilliant.
To really understand why this matters, you have to understand the suffocating reality of Belgium in 1943. The nation was completely swallowed up by the fascist war machine. The secret police ruled through absolute terror. But as this quote from resistance member Herman Bodson shows, defiance was still breathing. In this explainer, we're going to look at 3 impossible acts of audacity, where ordinary people decided that, hey, if they were going to be crushed by an unstoppable machine, they were going to break a few cogs on the way down.
Act 1. The Sky. The Aristocratic Rogue. So our first story belongs to Baron Jean de Selys Longchamps. He was a 28-year-old Belgian cavalry officer who refused to surrender when his country fell, and he eventually made his way to Britain to become an RAF pilot. He had a deeply personal score to settle too. The security police had recently tortured his father to death. Now just look at the absurdity of this comparison here. Jean actually pitched his plan to bomb their HQ to his British superiors, and they flat out denied it, said it was way too risky. So on January 20th, when he was ordered to strike a railway junction near Ghent, he hit his official target, casually ordered his wingman to fly back to England, and went totally rogue. He banked his Typhoon toward Brussels, lined up 453 Avenue Louise, and unleashed a deadly stream of cannon fire that literally ripped apart the Gestapo facade, killing the chief of the SD and the high-ranking commander Mueller.
And he didn't just obliterate the Gestapo offices with surgical precision, leaving the neighboring civilian buildings practically untouched. With sheer swagger, he opened his cockpit and dropped thousands of tiny Belgian and British flags over the city and the royal palace. It was just a massive psychological middle finger to the Nazis. And get this, he was back on the ground in England less than 30 minutes later.
Obviously, the British command was absolutely furious that he disobeyed orders. They immediately demoted him. But recognizing the sheer brilliance and the insane morale boost of the raid, they simultaneously awarded him the Distinguished Flying Cross. Tragically, Jean wouldn't survive the year. His plane was severely damaged by flak just a few months later, and he died upon landing. But his legend in Brussels, already cemented.
Act 2. The Tracks. 3 students stop a train.
On April 19, 1943, the 20th convoy left the Mechelen transit camp. Inside its newly reinforced, barbed wire-covered freight cars were 1,631 Jewish men, women, and children bound for the gas chambers of Auschwitz. The mismatch of what happened next is pure insanity. On the left side, the security apparatus of the German Reich, including 15 armed guards. On the right side, 3 young college students, Yura Lifshitz, Robert Maestro, and Jean-Frank Lamond. Their arsenal? A single pistol, some red paper to make a fake danger signal, and a bread knife. I mean, wait, they actually did what?
Between the towns of Boortmeerbeek and Hacht, these 3 kids actually managed to stop the train using their makeshift red lantern. In the pitch black, Maestro rushed the tracks, cracked open a wagon, and liberated 17 people before the guards started firing. But the heroism was contagious. The train's Belgian driver, Albert Dumont, purposefully drove at a crawling pace to let more people jump. Inside the train, an 18-year-old resistance nurse named Regine Crutchmole literally sawed through the wooden bars of her wagon's air inlet using that bread knife and threw herself into the night. Against all odds, 233 people successfully jumped from the train that night, including an 11-year-old boy named Simon Granovsky. While many were tragically recaptured or killed in the fall, 118 survived the war. It remains the only mass breakout from a Holocaust death train in recorded history.
Act 3. The Clocks. The Master Clockmaker's Trap.
This final, unbelievable event takes us to Leuven and centers on Henri Bosmans, a 46-year-old master clockmaker who realized something profound. The greatest weapon against an organized enemy is their own organization. Henri worked at the Central Railway Station, which by 1943 was this vital nervous system for the Nazi war machine, moving troops and ammunition. The German officers ran the entire network on absolute synchronized Prussian precision. Every single signal, every switch, every dispatch officer relied on a network of station clocks. And all of those clocks answered to one master timepiece in a tower that only Henri had the keys to.
Henri knew that the more perfect a mechanical system is, the more catastrophic its failure when a single gear lies. When he saw the schedule for April 9th, two massive military trains scheduled to pass each other on a single track line, he made his move. Sneaking into the tower in the dead of night, Henri didn't smash anything. He just shortened the master clock's pendulum by exactly 4 millimeters. That's it. This caused every clock in the station to invisibly speed up by 2%, eventually advancing the time by a fatal 15 minutes.
A terrifying countdown began. Transport 73 Alpha is roaring eastbound with fresh troops. Transport 91 Bravo is hurtling westbound, loaded with artillery shells. Now, they were supposed to pass at a safe switching point, but because Henri's clocks were lying, the dispatch officers confidently gave both trains the green light, believing the tracks were completely clear.
At 3:47 a.m., the two locomotives met head-on at full speed in the dark. The impact telescoped the trains into each other. Artillery shells cooked off in a chain reaction, creating this massive horizontal fountain of fire that was visible from 15 kilometers away. Over 200 meters of railway were instantly obliterated, and roughly 600 Nazi soldiers were killed in an inferno of twisted steel.
But Henri Bosmans wasn't celebrating. Standing on a hill 200 meters away, watching the flames rise and hearing the screams, he wept. He had struck a massive blow against the occupiers, but the horrific, visceral reality of taking human life, even enemy life, was a weight he would carry forever. It's just a stark, sobering reminder of the agonizing moral cost of resistance.
The resulting German investigation was just a masterclass in arrogance. The specialists ripped the station apart looking for electrical faults or massive mechanical failures. They couldn't fathom that a quiet Belgian civilian could orchestrate such a devastating strike right under their noses. Because they weren't looking for a 4mm adjustment on a pendulum, they literally never found it. The military officially blamed the disaster on human incompetence.
The consequences. The price of defiance.
A rogue pilot, 3 kids with a lantern, and a clockmaker. What actually happened to them? Well, the price of their defiance was unimaginably high. Baron Jean de Selys died in a crash later that year. Yura Lifshitz, one of the students who stopped the train, was arrested by the Gestapo and executed by firing squad in 1944. Jean Franklemont survived the brutal conditions of Sachsenhausen concentration camp, eventually passing away in 1977. And Henri Bosmans, the clockmaker who killed 600 soldiers, later lost his own son to a mass grave in Germany, dying of typhus as a prisoner of war.
Looking at post-war veteran newsletters and records, we are constantly reminded that resistance wasn't some action movie. It relied on vast, hidden networks of ordinary people who hid down pilots, forged papers, and passed messages. The liberation of Europe required 1 million quiet, lethal sacrifices.
And that is exactly why documenting these histories, preserving these memoirs, and after-action reports is so absolutely vital. Whether it's an American pilot returning to the French village that hit him, or the classified records of a hidden train sabotage, these stories force us to remember the very real, very human mechanics of war.
Which brings us to the core takeaway of this explainer. The heroes of 1943 Belgium were not comic book characters with superpowers. They were simply people who looked at their everyday lives, a fighter plane, a bread knife, a screwdriver, and decided to use them to break an empire.
The sheer audacity of these acts proves something fundamental. It really doesn't matter how heavily armed a regime is. It doesn't matter how perfectly synchronized their terror is. An occupying machine is only as strong as its smallest gear. And the moment that gear decides to stop turning, or turns just 4 millimeters too fast, the whole system can collapse.
These individuals found the blind spots in a fascist nightmare and ripped them wide open. It leaves us to wonder about our own courage and our own everyday tools. So I'll leave you with this. If you were ever faced with an unstoppable machine, what gear would you pull to break it?